Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to This Week in COVID. I'm your host, Dr. Larry Burchett, MD, actively practicing. This week starts college football, and not without controversy, as two of the big Power 5 conferences have canceled college football for their whole seasons. I'm talking about the Pac-12 teams like Stanford, UCLA, USC, and the Big Ten, Michigan, Penn State, Illinois, not playing for the whole season, while the SEC, the ACC, Big 12, and Notre Dame continue to move forward with modified schedules. I'm going to talk a little bit about why, explain viral myocarditis, and see if there isn't a way forward from here. This is going to be a good one. But I'm going to start, in my old man days, reading you a statement from the Pac-12 about why they suspended their sports for this season. This is from their committee. We are concerned about health outcomes related to the virus. Among these, there is new and evolving information regarding potential serious cardiac side effects to elite athletes. We do not have enough information to understand the short and long-term outcomes regarding these health issues. So they basically said two things. With COVID, they're worried about heart stuff. That's viral myocarditis. I'm going to explain that to you. And really the second thing they said was, we don't have enough information. There is too much unknown with this new virus. We don't want to put our athletes at risk this season because we don't know if they're going to be okay at the end of this or not. Seems reasonable, right? What do we need? We need the truth. How much COVID, when people get COVID, how often do they get myocarditis? Does it just go away? How severe is it? At 6 or 12 months, are they back to normal? We don't have that information. I'm going to review with you the information that we do have. Right now, all we really have is cases. Let me give you some examples of the cases we've got right now. Boston Red Sox pitcher Eduardo Rodriguez got COVID, got myocarditis, said he was really sick, out for the season. Georgia State quarterback Mikele Colasurdo got COVID, got myocarditis, also out for the season. Indiana offensive lineman freshman Brady Feeny, his mom went to Facebook worried her son got COVID and he has heart issues. Again, likely viral myocarditis. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. I think his mom's viral post influenced the Big Ten and was another reason why they decided to sit out this season. Now, this is what I want to start with, though. We're going to get into myocarditis in a minute. But what number of college athletes dies now to begin with? One, and how many? And how many per year? There's approximately 460,000 NCAA athletes. And we lose maybe 50 of them a year. 1 in 8,000. This is a great study. I love this study. I might do a whole segment just on this study. This information comes from a 10-year study from 2003 to 2013, 10 years, where they looked at all the athletes that died in college sports. There were 514 of them, about 1 in 8,000. That's about 0.01%, 50 per year. Now, of those 514, what did they die of? What would you guess would be like the number one cause, right? Accidents, car wrecks, falls, motorcycle, drowning was in that. That was about 50%, or 257 of them. But the number two cause of death, and this is what's important to this conversation, was sudden cardiac death. That accounted for 79 cases. That's about 8 per year. Now, sudden cardiac death, let's talk about that for a second. So sudden cardiac death, your heart normally beats, right? Like this, 60 beats a minute, 100 beats a minute, 150, 180, if you're exercising. Sudden cardiac death is when your heart goes out of control, beating 200, 300 beats a minute. It's not fully contracting. You're not getting blood to your brain, to your heart, to your lungs, to the rest of your body. When people get this, fatal arrhythmia, this is called, they collapse. This is when you would need to go do CPR, put the pads on them, shock them, bring them back, break them out of that rhythm. This is a main cause. This is the number one, sudden cardiac death is the number one medical non-trauma cause of death in college athletes, okay? Now what leads to sudden cardiac death? A lot of times it's when they're actually exercising and playing because there's increased demand and stress on the heart, which if you're healthy is fine. But if you have congenital heart disease, so heart disease you were born with, if your arteries are starting to get clogged, if you have myocarditis, if you have heart inflammation from various causes, but one of those causes of inflammation can be a virus. Now, in these numbers, when we look at, again, 514 deaths in 10 years, 79 of them were sudden cardiac death. Only 9% of those, so in 10 years, they only had 6 cases of myocarditis in over 4 million athletes. That's just not very many. It's less than 1 in a million dying of myocarditis, okay? So this thing to begin with, those people matter who died of it, but numbers-wise, it's tiny, okay? So that's what we're starting with. Now, so myocarditis, what is myocarditis? Remember we just said it's a potential cause of sudden cardiac arrest, but what is it? How does it affect the heart? Let's break down the word. Myo means muscle. Cardio, you know what cardio means, right? Heart. Itis means inflammation. So myocarditis just means inflammation of the heart tissue. And in this case, there's all kinds of, it can come from drugs, it can come from your own immune system, autoimmune myocarditis, could be bacterial or fungal, could be infectious. But in this case, we're talking about viral myocarditis, okay? So with COVID, how does it happen? So the virus, remember that ACE2 receptor protein, it enters cells directly, and some think that the virus directly causes inflammation of the heart. The other idea is that your immune system, the cytokine storm, overreacts, and it's our own immune response that leads to inflammation in the heart, okay? Either way, regardless of what the exact mechanism is, it results in 2 things I want you to know about. Number 1 is the heart can beat irregularly, so it affects the electrical circuits of the heart, where if you had that, so your heart could beat irregular, it could go too fast, that could be a predisposition for sudden cardiac arrest. Remember when we said the heart was beating out of control and too fast? Those symptoms would be, some people kind of complain of palpitations, shortness of breath, a skipped beat, something like that. Severe stuff, you get lightheaded and pass out, collapse being the most severe. So that's how viral myocarditis can kind of cause irregular heartbeats. The other thing that it can cause is heart failure. Remember the heart's a pump. Doesn't make that sound, but it's a pump. And if it's inflamed, like from a virus, sometimes it doesn't, instead of pumping like this, it pumps like this. That's heart failure. So you go out to walk and you jog or you run, your heart pumps faster, but with heart failure, it can't pump enough blood to bring enough oxygen to your muscles. And so people feel fatigued, they feel short of breath. They can't exert like they used to. And then sometimes there's swelling in their legs. These are symptoms of heart failure. Now, again, imagine the people we're talking about are student athletes. So if they're exerting themselves, putting more stress on their heart, and they have inflammation in the heart that can cause arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats, and can cause heart failure, it's kind of a bad setup because it increases the risk if they've got this inflammation that bad things can happen, okay? I want you to kind of see how those 2 things, those mechanisms of myocarditis, this is cause for, especially for concern in people who are using their heart, to its maximum. Now, so you can see the path we're going down. I keep looking at my notes. I've got good stuff for you. This next study's great. You can see how we're going down this path, and every year maybe 50 college athletes die, and a main cause of that is sudden cardiac death, and one cause is myocarditis. So the last thing that administrators want to hear is that, oh, COVID causes myocarditis, which is part of the number one reason that your college athletes die. So they hear that and they go, whoa, we want to do everything we can to prevent this. And they know kids are still, you can see college campuses, COVID is going around. There have been case reports. Plenty of athletes during practice have gotten this. You're not going to be able to prevent COVID from spreading during this season. So they're going to get it. And so the administrators are saying, well, we're not able to effectively prevent it. We got to cancel the whole season because we're just worried. What if these kids get myocarditis? They're playing and they drop dead. We don't have any cases of that yet, but that's going to be absolutely for the teams that are playing what there will be so much scrutiny on is, does anybody have a fatal complication, COVID-related fatal complication? If that happens, they're going to shut it all down. That's my prediction. Now, the following study is what freaked people out and really is a big player in this, in where we're at right now with this. There was a July 27, 2020, this MRI study that was published in JAMA out of Germany. I want to explain it to you. They took 100 patients who were hospitalized with COVID and recovered. Okay, these guys got better. And 2 months after their recovery, average of 70 days, they did an MRI. You know an MRI, the big long tube. A lot of times we do it for knees to like look at an ACL. We do it for brains to look at stroke, all kinds of things. They looked at an MRI. It's a very, very detailed test of the heart. And they were looking for inflammation. Well, maybe 10% of them still have some inflammation a couple months later. What they found was really alarming, which was 78% of these guys, again, they were hospitalized before, but 2 months later still had cardiac problems and involvement of COVID. Now, what percent actually had inflammation in the muscle, that myocarditis? 60%, over half. That was 2 months later. And it didn't seem to correlate with, this isn't just heart patients. It was everybody that was hospitalized for this. Didn't seem to be worse if they had high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever. It seemed to be all of them. And so you can imagine hearing this, oh my gosh, 60%. And again, that was in hospitalized patients. That wasn't in everybody. So one potential kind of argument against this study is, well, those were the sick people. This isn't the asymptomatic people. This isn't the young, healthy college athletes. But if 60% of them got it and still had it 2 months later, what about the rest of us? What about these college athletes? And the answer is we don't know. We don't have that information. But you can see how this thing freaks out the person making the decision. Now, there's another piece of information I want you to have. Dr. Kurt Daniels, you may have seen this in the news, director of sports cardiology at Ohio State. He's been pooling his data. Now, he hasn't released it or published it officially, but he kind of leaked to the media that he's noticed of the athletes that have gotten COVID, 15% of them have myocarditis. So it's not the 60% of this JAMA one. And it's hard to know exactly what that means. Does that mean 15% for everybody, just his population? You need more details about all of that. But that's still alarmingly high if we're talking about 460 student athletes for whom the number one non-traumatic cause of death is sudden cardiac arrest. 15% have myocarditis. Some of them would die from this because of COVID. And the question is, how many? And we don't know. We don't know. That is unknown. Now, let me get the other side, because a lot of doctors have publicly criticized both this JAMA MRI study and said, look, this is terrible data. We don't do MRIs to diagnose myocarditis. You don't know if those patients were fine and their hearts were working fine. We really don't have good data right now about myocarditis and COVID. You guys are overreacting. We don't have anything real substantial to shut the season down with. Further, most people that get myocarditis recover 100% and are fine. You're overreacting. And there's been a fair number of physicians that have had this, that have had that reaction as well. Let me say one thing about, so let's go back. I wanted to bring this up again too, this poor guy. Indiana offensive lineman, freshman Brady Feeny. Just to go back and forth, right? So you got doctors saying, wow, we don't know, this could be really bad. It could affect a lot of these athletes could affect their heart, lead to some of them dying. And you got the other side saying, we don't have good evidence for that. Then you got Brady Feeny's mom, who went viral on Facebook. We're going to include this little post of hers, where she was rightly worried. He got COVID, he got heart issues, they were persistent, probably had myocarditis, couldn't play. She was worried about him. So his mom blows it up, and this is just kind of an example of the worry, the fear that these boards are going to have to deal with. And some think that actual viral post influenced these committees and what they did. What do we need? Where are we at? I think it's pretty clear from this conversation. We need to know, for college athletes, when they get COVID, what percent of them are going to get myocarditis? 15? We don't know that yet. We need published data for that. 2, when they do get myocarditis, how bad is it? Do they get better at 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months? What percent of them at 12 months have hearts that are back to normal? Is this just something where it's like, well, 1% of them can't play anymore? Or is this something where 25, 50% end up having a severe heart failure and can never play sports again? Now, I don't think that's the case, but again, we don't have good data on that. There is some unknown regarding that. We need that information. So what do we do going forward? Well, I think first of all, this is my little opinion part. I think you look at, so I'm going to bring up this May, and this is from May. This is months ago. This is a May 2020 JAMA article about returning to play for athletes. And it basically says when they get COVID, they need to sit out, right? You don't want to spread COVID, number one. But number 2, you can't play when you're sick. And this probably includes people that are asymptomatic as well. So you sit out, then you wait a couple weeks, and you get tested by a cardiologist. There's 3 things that they need to do. A blood test, looking for signs of heart damage or inflammation. Those are elevated. Number 2 is a test that assesses the function of the heart. That's an ultrasound on the heart to watch it contract. Remember, watch it pump. And the third one is an EKG, electrocardiogram, that looks at the electrical activity of your heart. If all of those are okay and there's no evidence of myocarditis and they don't have any symptoms, then they can slowly increase exertion till they're, over the period of really weeks, till they're back to performance level exertion stuff. That seems to me to be a safe way where they can both play and then resume back to their regular level of activity. Again, even with this, there's still unknown. During all of it, whatever we do, this is a laboratory experiment. We need to study this and pay very close attention to what happens and how they do. I also think politically, the college athletes, should have a place at the table and be able to advocate for themselves and what they want. It shouldn't just be big college football weighing out liability versus billions of dollars. I think it also needs to account the athlete that's affected in this as well. Of course, most of them are going to say they want to play, although some of them that have professional futures have decided to sit that out as well. But I do think they need a place at the table. We will see. Watch this closely. Again, I'm predicting one athlete dies and they're going to shut it down. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully that they can manage this for those that do play and go forward in a safe manner for all of these college athletes. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of This Week in COVID. Please share it. As always, stay safe, do your part. I will see you next week.